If you ask me who would win the British out of David Howe, Gawain Jones and Luke McShane, if they were all playing regularly, then I'd probably say, although there's not a great deal in it, I'd probably say Luke McShane. Luke, of course, is a tremendously talented player, and it's very interesting that he's actually entered the British this time. Clearly, this is as a result probably of the 9-round system, so he only has to take 1 week off work. Of course, Luke has represented England with great honour and distinction for many, many years now. He's still only a young man, but seems as though he's been around for an awful long time. So he carries a great deal of experience into this British Championship. And of course, you can never write him off. He played recently at the King's Place Festival in London. Another very strong rapid play event, which took place on the 8th of July. And we're going to look at a game he played there with the Black Pieces against Mark Hebden. Hebden's never won the British. I think I would rather like him to win it, but it's a bit of a tall order because Mark's not getting any younger, and this counts for something when you're playing in a really quite intense tournament against much younger players. But of course, Hebden's got more experience than virtually anybody else in the tournament, apart from Keith Arkle, so perhaps he can use that to win this event. So Hebden's playing white, and you have to remember this is a rapid play game. Luke McShane playing black. Actually, whether it's rapid, classical or blitz, it doesn't make an enormous amount of difference to Hebden, who's got such a well grooved in repertoire. You know, you virtually know what he's going to play, but what can you do about it? He's banking on his experience over decades to see him through against any sort of preparation. So here he is playing his famous barrier attack. And McShane plays a rather solid looking move here, pawn up to c6. I guess the idea of that is to sidestep a line with queen to d2, when I suppose black will not play bishop g7 just yet. He's going to make some other useful moves first. Maybe bishop f5 is a move, maybe b5, maybe knight bd7. But at any rate, Hebden prefers to go back into a kind of classical barrier attack position, omitting queen d2 for the time being, just going h3, bishop g7, e3, and now this typical barrier attack setup with bishop to e2, and black plays knight bd7. So it's a question of where white goes from here. What we've got on the board is really a hybrid of the London system and the Verisov, and it's up to white to show what he's doing here. In the normal barrier attack, you'd probably see white putting his knight into e5 and pushing the kingside pawns. But I suppose Hebden feels, having played h3, that would incur a slight loss of time. So really, we're looking for white to open up the game with either e4, which seems some way off, or maybe even c4, sometime in the future. Meanwhile, black's going to probably just develop his pieces, b6, bishop b7, play c5 at some moment. Very solid way to proceed. And Hebden played a4. Well, okay, the two players had played this position a long time ago, as far back as 2005 in a 4NCL game. And we'll see that game a little bit later on. So they're just repeating what had gone before. Instead of a4, I must say castles looks like a pretty reasonable move. And I suppose black could go b6 as he does in the game. This seems to me to be a pretty sensible setup. How is white going to make inroads against this formation? Well, if he goes a4, we're going to go back into the game after a5. Can he try for e4 here by playing queen to d3? I mean, that must be another move here. Well, black will probably go a5 and use the white queen as a target by playing bishop to a6. And there doesn't seem too much wrong with black's game here. Once the bishops come off the board, he plays queen to c8. White goes e4. I mean, this looks like a typical way for white to handle the position. And then black can maybe trade some pieces here and go e6. I suppose white would argue that he's got a faint edge here, but it is only very faint. Black's position is very solid. He can continue with rook e8 and maybe queen b7, rook c8. It's hard for white to make inroads. So going back to the game, Hebden plays a4. and McShane puts the block on with a5. White castles now b6. Knight at e5. A typical Barry move. Maybe the bishop will come to f3 and e4 will follow. Of course, in this case, the knight attacks the pawn on c6. So not wishing to lose time, McShane defends with bishop b7. I suppose this type of thing's okay with black. If you're happy with a draw. I mean, it looks rock solid to me with black. And by a draw, I mean that white can probably, by leading up to a quick e4, force some exchanges in the centre and reach a type of equal position that we saw earlier with this queen on e4. I'm sure he can get that almost by force in this type of position. In general, black can only win this type of thing if white tries for the win himself. Well, in a rapid play tournament, and Hebden being the great warrior that he is, the game must continue. So he plays bishop h2, and now McShane just goes e6. And this is still following their earlier game. Knight takes knight. Is this Hebden's improvement over the earlier game from West Bromwich in 2005, where white played rook to b1? Well, when he plays this way, it looks like he's angling to play b4, doesn't it? And in that game, Hebden, McShane, West Bromwich, black played queen to e7 to stop him. White went knight to a2, rook f to c8, and now he went c4. Well, to be honest, I'm not surprised that Hebden didn't repeat this game, because the whole stuff with knight a2 and rook b1 looks a bit artificial. And in fact, black was able to get to an equal game very easily here by trading on e5, by taking on c4, and then going c5, bringing all his pieces into the game. And this looks nothing for white at all, although it is equal. So the game was drawn after 41 moves. Going back to the actual game, Hebden took the knight. Knight takes knight, and now e4. So here we are, white's making his bid for an advantage by playing this pawn break. And McShane took it. What you don't want to do against Hebden is to give yourself weaknesses which you can't get rid of. Then his fantastic technique can come into play. And that's probably why black didn't go c5. Instinctively he feels that that might give him a weakness which Hebden can zero in on. For instance, it takes, and then black's got this pawn on d5. But at the same time, the computers are showing me this might have been a better way for black, because he can answer bishop f3 with knight to e4. And the most significant aspect of this position is the bishop on g7, which is really in the game now. And Luke may well have considered this possibility. From my chair, it's a bit better for black. But as I say, you know, when you're playing rapid chess, don't really want to give yourself weaknesses. So he takes on e4 and decides to play c5 now. Seeing that, knight d6 can be answered by bishop c6. Nice safe position for black. He's still putting pressure on with his bishop on g7. The bishop on g7 seems much more significant to me than the bishop on h2. So Luke probably felt, well, this is perfectly okay for me. Very easy to play. I'll carry on with this. And white went bishop b5. Black took it, as he probably must. White took with the knight, protecting d4, and now black brought his queen out to g5. So we have a kind of equal position on the board here, but one which is not even, if you see what I mean. It's equal chances, but there's plenty to play for both sides. Hebden can eye up the weaknesses on the black queen side. Meanwhile, black is pretty active. Bishop c7. Well, this is, of course, a logical move. Going in after the weak pawn on b6. And giving black a bit of a problem to solve. We note that Hebden has done his utmost to shut down the long diagonal, because he's afraid of that bishop on g7. So the pawn on c3 is very useful in that regard. It shuts down the diagonal. But at the same time, as I said, black is very active here. And he gets into the game with e5 right away. If he goes on to kind of defence mode here with knight to a6, this is a playable move because he's intending to answer bishop takes b6 with rook to b8 and then take on b2. So if knight f3 here, queen f5, bishop takes b6, black can go rook fb8. Now, why didn't he do this? Well, probably, again, he felt, why do I need to take any risk whatsoever? My position's perfectly reasonable. I can go active with e5. This way round, Hebden might be in a position where he's going to control the game. For instance, I mean, black can go bishop c5. But the fact is, black is a pawn up, pawn down in this position. And this is probably why McShane didn't do it. Of course, he is very active. So this is maybe pretty equal. But equal with white for choice, if I can put it that way. So the initiative is very important in quick play games. This is why he goes e5. And white brings his knight back to f3. Well, it's hard to say why white doesn't go knight b5 here. I mean, that looks like a pretty good move. Bit more aggressive than knight f3. Don't know what the clock situation was. But to me, this looks a bit better for white than the game. All the same, black is okay after e4. You know, he can get his pieces to good squares. And maybe that knight can come to d3. Of course, if b2 falls, then, you know, the white position could fall apart right away. So white's got to be a bit careful here. He can't just pursue his initiative willy-nilly. So McShane gave the b pawn in order to put his knight in. And now he's attacking b2. b4, Hebden goes wrong. Well, Mark must have known that that would open up the long diagonal. Again, it's an instinctive decision at this stage of the game. Let's just have a look at some alternatives. What else could white do? Could he try to undermine the knight with g4, queen e4, knight g5? Well, I would argue this is not the type of thing you want to do in a rapid play game. You're opening up your king, giving yourself some problems. And black can go very active here after rook b8. Probably white's best move here is just to play rook d1, then takes, takes, and takes. Well, we'll reach a position which the computers may say is equal, but one which I much prefer black in because of that open king. So we can see why, going back to the game, he doesn't go g4. Can he go rook b1? Well, that's going to be a bit passive for a player of Hebden's taste. What he wants is a small nibble, and he can try to torture you for hours or even minutes in this format. Rook b1, I'm sure he considered that, but didn't like rook b8. Well, white can go bishop c7 here. This is an interesting idea, allowing black to take on b2 in order to get his queen in on d5. Then we may continue knight takes a4, queen takes a5, e4. The queens come off, knight comes to h4, black takes on c3, white takes on f5, bishop f6. Well, this has got draw written all over it. So objectively, that was probably white's best choice, just to go with the passive rook b1. But again, I can see why he doesn't do it. b4, very risky. Allows McShane to open up the long diagonal by force with e4. And win material, I think. So Hebden goes knight to d4. Well, can he save himself here? Don't think rook a3 is any good. That may have been what white was intending, but I think it actually fails here to knight b2. And then we've got two white units under attack. I mean, white can pretend he's getting something here with a move like a5, but knight c4 should really do the business. So Hebden plays knight to d4, queen to d7. You can see that white's getting into a mess here. He's got to sacrifice the exchange, which McShane is very happy to take. And now rook fb8. If white could be given just a couple of moves to organise himself, he'd probably be okay. But as it is, his pieces are spread out all over the board. And this gives Luke the chance to zero in and finish the game, which he does very efficiently with takes, takes, and then rook to c8. Mark Hebden tries the last trick, but there's a nice finish coming up with rook to b3, which actually traps the white knight. Black's threatening rook b7. There's not a lot white could do about it, and so Mark Hebden resigned. And I would say that for the last 10 moves or so, McShane showed excellent technique. I mean, he showed what a good player he was, just winning his one position. And so we go to Llandudno, the largest, I believe, and most popular tourist resort in Wales. The gateway to Snowdonia, I'm sure a very nice place for families and players to exist for 8 or 9 days. And we look forward to a really excellent event. This will be my last British Championship commentary. I remember starting in 1988, did it for a few years with Graham Lee, and I've done it ever since 1998, which is 20 years on the row, and that's quite enough for anybody. With the modernisation of the event, I think the commentary needs modernising too. We need to get younger people in to do the job, and we need to make it a bit more professional, I think. I would appeal to the organisers to spend a bit of money on the commentary, hire some good people, get some good equipment, and really showcase the tournament as it should be showcased. A really great event. Must say I've enjoyed every single minute of every year that I've commentated at the British. Wonderful audiences, great times, a lot of laughs, and I'll miss it. But at the same time, I actually want to go back to studying and playing chess, and maybe try for the GM title late in life. You know, that is the aim. So next year, I think you'll be seeing me actually playing at the tournament rather than actually speaking, which will be nice for me. So that's about it for now. We look forward to Llandudno. I'm looking forward to getting the last gig in and doing a good job. So I will see you there. That's it for now.